I'd like to introduce Craig now, as he's going to give us his address, his talk, his exhortation on faith in the storm, Jesus.
All right, thanks, Baz, very much, and lovely to see you all. Well, sort of. I can see Barry, but I know that everyone else is out there, and it's great. I can see we've got 30 attendees who have joined us. So big shout outs to everyone from Carolyn to Klaus to Emmanuel. I'm not going to go through them all. Hagen, Lib, Raphael, Simone, Stuart, Gameza. We've got people from all over the world, and obviously many more also in our YouTube channel. So wonderful to have you all with us, and to be part of what we are going to now be looking at over this long Easter weekend. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly share a screen with you because we're going to try and let you also get a little bit involved. So it might be tricky if you're only on one device. This could be a little tricky for you, but otherwise, if you have a phone somewhere, you can jump into menti.com and stick in that code, and there'll be a couple of opportunities for you to say something. So if you have a moment, you can jump in at the moment and quickly say hi, which will be lovely, so that the people out there can see you and know that you're out there. So join and say hello. So it's quite simple. You just go to menti.com, use the code 6358 and 28, and you can send out a little hello message. So the intention is I'll be using this for your slides. So if you want, you can follow along on your phone, or obviously you can just see it on the laptop or whatever you're busy watching this on. And as I said, there'll be a couple of opportunities for people to make comments if the Menti works. So the code is 635828, and so we've got a few people saying hello. Can't really see who you are, so if you want to put your name, that's up to you. You don't have to put your name. That's totally up to you. Right, so hello, Liesel and Henry here. Nice to have you, and hello to all the hellos who are saying hello. Hi from Brockwell. Yeah, that's all the way from the East Coast. Liesel and Sophia in Kloof and Carolyn there. So hopefully that does give us it was a good evening. Is it evening? Okay, that's someone from one of the foreign climates. Greetings from Oz. And Shah, Joan here in Moy River. So we see we're getting people coming in from all over the country and the world. So quite strange that even though we're all separated in this way, we are also all together. So really nice to have everyone here. Right, so as I said, you will get an opportunity as we go through to contribute 1 or 2 times. Just to help keep you engaged and keep your thinking going as we go through the topic that we want to have a look at today. So hi everyone, and let us now move on and consider our topic. Lockdown, it's just an unprecedented thing that we've never experienced before, and for us in South Africa, obviously we've got it happening now extended for another 2 weeks. So it's a massive thing, and it's not just here, as we know, it's obviously all around the world. And so it's a strange time, and it's making for obviously a lot of concern, a lot of worry as this virus sweeps through the world. But also I think it makes us sort of reflect on a whole lot of things, and I think there's some key messages. And so what I want to share is what I consider to be a very powerful lesson and metaphor that Jesus talks about, because one of the things that obviously is inherent in lockdown is you in your house, and the door is locked essentially, and you're stuck inside. And so it reminded me of the verse where Jesus says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I'll come in to him and dine with him and he with me." And so we're in this situation where we are essentially locked in, and outside there's a lot of fear, and we can't go out, but there's someone who can come in. And for a while I've been considering, which I was meant to be headed off to Australia at the moment, and was going to be doing a series on doors, because there's this fascinating metaphor that takes place when Jesus enters the door of a home. And obviously there's what's going on naturally, but obviously it's a lesson as well for when he enters the door of our own homes. And so I wanted to consider that. So very quickly, just thinking, well, what is a door? Oh, it seems like a silly question. This door is a thing you open, but a door represents more than just a physical thing that we open. It is definitely a metaphor for a whole lot of things. A door is a metaphor for a portal to another place. A door is something that creates new opportunity. A door is a barrier. A door is an entry and an exit point. A door is a separator. And so the concept of a door is quite important because it indicates that there is a place that you go through, and when you go through it, something else happens on the other side, whether it's concealed for only a group of people to see, or whether the door is open for many to see. And hopefully in what we're going to look at today, we're going to see there is some powerful lessons in this. John 20, verse 19, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for peace, for the fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And I think that's almost what we are experiencing at the moment. We inside our doors, the doors are locked, and we have a fear of probably not the Jewish leaders, but something even worse at the moment, the leading virus that our world's probably ever seen or seen for a long time. And we're hoping that we can experience what they did, where Jesus suddenly comes in and stands amongst us and says, "Peace be with you." And so what I want us to do is to open a door. And as I suggested, there are lots of stories about Jesus entering homes. And I think while those stories have a sort of natural lesson where he goes in and he performs a miracle, or he has a meal, or he does something in the home, there is another level when we start to try and explore the concept that it's a lesson to us of what can happen or should happen when we open the door to our own hearts. And so let's do that and open the door on this first story that we read in Luke 8. And when Jesus, verse 51 of Luke 8, entered into the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except. And so here we have a story where Jesus is about to enter a home. And what takes place in this story is phenomenal. And I think the lessons of what takes place here are just absolutely huge and absolutely appropriate to our lives at the moment. But before we enter into the house of Jesus to see what takes place, we need to go to the backstory, because the backstory helps us understand what's about to happen. And so in Matthew's record in chapter 9, verse 18, we see where this sort of begins. So while Jesus was saying this, he was having a discussion around who's important and around different issues around bread and wine and all sorts of things. A synagogue leader came and knelt before him and said, "My daughter is about to die, but come and put your hand on her and she will live." Right, so here's an opportunity for you. If you concentrated in our reading, what was the synagogue leader's name? I'll give you a moment to ponder that. We actually did mention it in the reading. See if you can remember what the synagogue leader's name is. You see, you thought this was just going to be a little passive thing with you just sitting there dozing, going and grabbing another cup of tea, relaxing. No. This is your opportunity to also participate. So I can see 3 people have submitted. I'll put the what people are saying up on the screen in a moment. But what was the synagogue leader's name? And also, can you spell it right? That's probably more of a trick. Probably some of you are quickly going to reread the passage. That's fine. I don't mind. That means you are focused and concentrating. All right. We've got 11 submissions so far. 12. All right. Let's go and see if the majority have got it right or not. So what was the synagogue leader's name? There we go. Okay, not I forgot. Jairus was the synagogue leader's name. We have a few other spellings of it. Jairus, Juris, Cyrus, Bob. Okay, all right, thank you. We're getting some really good ones coming out there, but good. You were focused. Jairus, not a common name nowadays, but that was the synagogue news. I think some people who said Cyrus were getting confused between Cyril and Jairus. So no, it wasn't Cyrus. Well, it's a cloud. So he's come to Jesus and he has a desperate plea. For he had only one daughter and she was dying. And when we consider that, it's an absolute plea of desperation. His one daughter is dying. And so if we think about it, what's this saying to us? The most precious thing that Jairus has is dying in the very heart of his home. That his daughter that represents everything for him. She is his hope, because without her, there is no future for him and his family seed going forward. She is all his love, the parents' love. She is the one who they're going to have to put all their faith in ultimately to care for them going forward as they get old. And so she represents everything about them, his faith, his hope, and his love. We read this in Romans 10. Who's dying? The word is near you. It's in your mouth and in your heart. And so when we reflect on this in our own lives, what is the precious daughter, our only daughter, that might be dying in the very middle of our homes? And the word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. And that word is Jesus. And maybe in our lives prior to this, or even now, our relationship with him wasn't what it should be. And it was dying in the very midst of our hearts. We read in the Old Testament that God has also set eternity in the heart of man. It's the same thing. It's Jesus. It's God himself. It is the divine presence within us. And there's no doubt, if we had to look at the world over the last few years, that has shriveled in the hearts of many, many people. And so for each of us, we need to look to our own heart and consider, has that died within me? And so for a lot of us, I'm sure that at some level, our faith, our hope, and maybe even our love has shriveled and is lying really, really sick within us. And maybe it's because of difficulties. Maybe it's because sometimes of exactly the opposite, prosperity, or whatever it is, that thing which is so precious, which cannot be replaced, which is in the center of our lives. For a lot of us, that may be really ill and on the edge of death. And so we come to consider, how do we find faith in a storm like this? How do we find faith when all around us there's just turmoil, there's so much uncertainty, we don't know what's happening, where it's going to go, we don't have answers. The presidents of countries have absolutely no idea. We are in an unprecedented situation where nobody knows how this is going to work out. And then we come and look inside our own hearts, and we maybe have uncertainty as well. We've lost our contact with the divine. We've lost our contact with God, with the things that maybe were important to us. Maybe they're sick and maybe they're not what they should be. And so inside and outside, there may be a storm raging that makes it really difficult for us at the moment. And so he fell down at the feet of Jesus and begged him that he would come into his house. And this is the beginning of the process to bring life back to that thing that is precious in us. The beginning of the process is the cry for help in humility. Remember, he is the ruler. He's the head honcho of the synagogue. And he falls at the feet of Jesus, because when we are desperate, that's what we do. And we beg him to come into our lives, because we need healing and we need help. My daughter is about to die, but come and put your hand on her and she will live. Look at his confidence. He's come to Jesus. He's come to find Jesus and begging him to come and restore life to that precious thing. And that's what we need to do when we're in desperation. We need to come to Jesus and beg him to enter into our life, into our very heart, into our house. We have to open the door. It's not going to happen outside. It's going to happen inside. And we need to have the faith and the belief, despite what's going to seem impossible. And we might say, it's just not possible where I'm in my life. It's just not possible. Well, if we can just believe and ask him in, we'll see the miracle happen. And so as Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. Now, this was zero social distancing happening here. I mean, this is like, remember the old days we used to have crowds of people? I remember those days, the old days, there'd be people everywhere. And it's crazy if you watch a movie, because we have lots of opportunity to do that now, Tom, because you're sitting inside, and you watch movies and people are in subways and trains and in restaurants and in And you're like, wow, everyone's so close and touching. Well, that's exactly the situation it was here. And so Jesus is on his way to Jairus, and it's not like he's by himself. There's this massive crowd, and they're all pressing against him as he makes his way to Jairus's home. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. When she came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately his bleeding stopped. And I find it fascinating because we have a storyline here. And the storyline is about Jairus. He's come to Jesus and he's calling for Jesus to come into his home. But another story weaves in it. And while we're not going to specifically look at this story, there is something really interesting, because our decision about how things should be is often not how it works out. We have it figured that we call to Jesus and he comes and enters our home. But often the road is not exactly like that. It's a winding road. It's a road that is not direct. It's a road that seems to be not the path we exactly wanted. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me. And it's like a pause button that's been hit. There's this frenzy. Jairus has come. People probably recognize him. He's fallen. He's worshipped before Jesus. He's begging Jesus. There is an urgency, and pause. Jesus stops moving. Now, for us, we want the solution. We want it now. Imagine the testing of faith for Jairus, because all of a sudden, Jesus has stopped. And if you're like me, when we're stressed, when we're under pressure, anything that distracts from us achieving the goal or solving the problem makes us more freaked out. If there's a pause and everything stops. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord, says the psalmist. And it's easy to read. But when you're in a situation like Jairus, when you're in a situation of desperation, it's not so easy to hit the pause button, to wait on the Lord. And so Jairus has come, and he's sought humbly. But now he has to wait patiently. He has to wait on the Lord. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. And again, we read the verse and we understand the verse, but to do it in the midst of a crisis is so hard. And just at the moment, we sit like that, and we're being forced, in a sense, to wait on the Lord. It's not so easy when we pressurize, when we're unsure, when we are scared. And then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. And in the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. And then he said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. And then there are 3 more words he says to her. Who knows what they are? 3 more words. Anyone get? Right, we've got a few people putting in their answers. What were the final 3 words that Jesus said to that woman? Here we go. Let's see if you got it. Go in peace. And I like the other suggestions. You're forgiven. Go in faith. But he's speaking peace into the heart of this woman. She herself is in turmoil. And there's turmoil within turmoil. There's her crisis within the crisis of Jairus, within the crisis of the crowd. Yet into that, Jesus speaks those 3 beautiful words, go in peace. And so those are the final 3 words. He says to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. What beautiful words to hear when we so desperately need it. And so even in this pursuit of the miracle for Jairus, there is an unseen miracle happening in the crowd. And maybe sometimes we would miss these things because we're so fixed on what we're trying to do and solve for ourselves. Yet this miracle happens in the midst of all the crisis. And while Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader, and they say to him, your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore. Wow. Imagine those 4 words. Your daughter is dead. And then don't bother the teacher anymore. That must have been a huge test for Jairus. He had made all of this effort, and then there had been a delay. He had been patient, and the delay has caused this message to arrive. Your daughter is dead. That which was most precious to Jairus is now dead. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid. Just believe and she will be healed. And we're talking about faith in the storm. We're talking about faith, not fear. And again, we read that, but he is in the midst of a storm that is unprecedented. Not only was his daughter about to die, he has now been told she is dead. And this is now requiring ultimate faith in Jesus. Do not be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. And so it's at this point that we finally arrive at the door. And that's the backstory, just getting us to here. All of this drama with the crowds and the people and everything has been going on, and the healing and the patience and the bad news. And we arrive and we open the door. But outside that crowd, they haven't left. They're still there. The massive crowd, no social distancing. They're all there they also want to come in the house. They want to see what's happened. The outside crowd is pushing to come inside too. And when Jesus arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. And so, a very important lesson. Jesus would not allow the outside crowd to come in. And that is a very important lesson for us, because that noisy crowd outside, which has a whole lot of names like we see in Galatians, like sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, that whole list of bad sins, of things that we all do, are not allowed in the house of Jesus. They follow us all over the place. They crowd around us in our everyday lives, our selfish ambition, our anger, our desire, our drunkenness, our fighting, our dissensions. When Jesus said, no, they are not allowed in the house. The outside crowd cannot come in. And so when Jesus enters our life, the first condition is the outside crowd will not be allowed in. And that is going to make all the difference. Interesting about the crowd, because earlier Peter had said in Luke 8, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. That word actually means, it's the same word when they used in an olive press. They're crushing against you, because that is exactly what the crowd does. 2 Corinthians says, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair. You see, that is what these things do to us in life. When we are pursuing all our own selfish ambitions, all of those things outside there, what are they doing? They are crushing us, crushing us. But Jesus says, no, they can't come inside. I will not allow it. The name of the Lord is a fortified tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. And so we run inside with Jesus, and he slams the door. And those people, those things in our life that we maybe thought were important, but are actually the things that are crushing us, are not allowed in. And we come inside and, peace. It's beautiful. It's tranquil. We've escaped the crowd outside, and finally, cup of tea, we can enjoy a nice meal with Jesus, a glass of wine. You've still got wine. We seem to have run out of that in this country now. With the extra 2 weeks, we're in trouble. It's peaceful inside. No, it isn't. It's not peaceful inside. When Jesus enters inside, don't worry about the crowd outside. Inside, there is a party happening, a massive crowd. And when Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house, we read in Matthew 9:23, and saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes. There's a party going. Guys on the guitar and on the drums and the trumpet. What? There is massive noise inside. There is a huge group of people inside. There is a crowd outside, and there is a crowd inside. I was wondering, how did the crowd arrive so quickly? I mean, they've just found out, Jairus has just found out that his daughter's dead. And these people are there already wailing and howling and got the band set up and everything is going. I mean, this couldn't be long because the messengers that came to Jairus said, your daughter is dead. And then he came straight to the house. Well, in that time, there is a party happening in there. How did they arrive so quickly? Well, they didn't. They obviously were already there. The crowd was already inside. The crowd had been there. They were waiting. For out of the heart come evil thoughts and murder and adultery and sexual immorality and theft and false testimony and slanders. The crowd inside has the same sort of names as the crowd outside. They're there, already living in our lives. All of these things, this noise, these things that will actually be celebrating at the death of the most precious thing in our lives are inside already. All those lusts and evil thoughts are in our lives already. And they have the same names as those outside. You see, there are two crowds. Outside is a crowd called opportunity. Inside is a crowd called desire. And so we can shut the door, and Jesus can shut the door on opportunity. But unless we evict desire inside us, the noise and the crowd will remain. And so not only do we need to shut out opportunity, we need to kill the desire as well. And Jesus is the one, when he enters our life, that he does this. He is the one who shuts out the opportunity and stills those desires that we may have. Amos says this, it will be as though a man fled from a lion only to meet a bear, as though he entered his house and rested his hand on the wall only to have a snake bite him. And so we're running from the outside problems, from all of those issues, and we get into the house, we shut the door and lean on the wall, and bah, a snake bites us, because sin is already within us. It's living in our hearts. And so Jesus has to come in and deal with it inside, shut out the opportunities, but even more so, remove the desire that lives right inside us, kill the snake. And there's only one person who could do that, the snake killer. And so Paul, reflecting on this crowd problem, says, oh, what a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? There he is. He's saying, I've got a crowd problem. Inside of me is this crowd that I have to get rid of. Who's going to get it out of me? Who's going to rescue me? And later on in Romans 7, he says, thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord. He is the one who will crush the snake that might be on our wall. He will be the one who will get rid of the crowd outside and inside. It is only through Jesus, through nothing that we do, that we can get the crowd out from inside our lives. Jesus doesn't come in and say, okay, guys, I just want to discuss this issue with you. While you're here, can we talk about it? There's no debate on our desires. There's no talk on how to suppress them. There's no consoling words. I understand that you feel like that. Jesus, get the crowd out. They cannot be in our hearts. They cannot be in our lives. Those things must be evicted, and only he can do that. Stop wailing, Jesus says. She's not dead, but asleep. He says it as it is. There is life, and the life comes with me. Stop it. And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea. What are the three words that are missing there? And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Another beautiful three words that Jesus says. In the midst of a storm, like a storm that we're experiencing, like a storm that Jairus is experiencing, Jesus was in a storm himself. And in the midst of that storm, it says he arose and he rebuked the wind and the sea. And what were the three words that he said? We have a few suggestions coming in. Peace, be still. Well done, everyone. Right. It's the same or very similar words to what was said to the woman. Peace, be still. You see, that is what Jesus wants to speak into our storm. He wants to speak peace, and it's only him who can do it. Peace, be still. And there was a great calm. And what did the people do? They're like, they're laughing at him. Oh, that's ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about. You see, people may laugh when we think and talk about Jesus being able to come into our lives and fix our problems, knowing that the thing that's so precious to us is nearly dead or dead. And Jesus says, no, it's not. I will raise your hope. I will raise your love. I will raise your peace and your joy. And after the crowd had been put outside, life can now finally enter. Very truly, I tell you, whoever hears my words and believes him who sent me has eternal life. Jesus is saying, this is not something in the future. The life of the eternity, that eternal life will enter your home and your life right now, if you will let it. And so, beautiful verse, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you, not as the world gives it to you. Don't let your heart be troubled. And we have this picture, and if you Google it, you'll find an image like this, the peace of Jesus. The beautiful island, tropical scene. That's what we will have. Jesus will give us that peace. No, that is not the peace of Jesus. This is the peace of Jesus. It is a peace that transcends everything. It is a peace that transcends storms. It is not the island sipping the tequila. It's the peace in a boat on a storm. That is what Jesus is offering us. The peace in our storm right now, the peace in a crowd. And Jesus is saying, I can give you that peace. And so just as Jesus, I don't know how he did it, fell asleep in the middle of a storm because he was so at peace with God in his life. That is the peace that he's offering. He's saying, I can give you a peace that transcends storms. And I want to give that into your life. Be still and know that I am God. And that is the peace of Jesus. It is the peace that he brings. It is the peace that God brings. Be still and know that I am God. And it's about being still. It's about being quiet. It's about giving thanks for what Jesus offers. And Jesus said, my child, get up. And her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. What a beautiful culmination to the story. My child, get up. And at once she stood up. And that knowing the time, that now is high time to awake out of sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believe. This is the gift Jesus is saying. He says, I want to come into your life, into your heart, get rid of the crowd on the outside, destroy the crowd that is inside, and resurrect the thing that is most precious to you, your faith in God, your love in God, the Spirit of God that lives inside us. I can do it. And people may laugh, and people might think it's impossible, and people may say it's not possible in the storm that we live in at the moment. But now is the time for us to wake out of our sleep. And then the story finishes with this funny little verse. Then Jesus told them to give us something to eat. You would say, well, why don't we have a party now? You know, we got rid of all the party people. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. I was wondering why he said that. And I'm sure there is some sort of echo, something we should be hearing in this whole story and what's taken place. Obviously, we need to feed our faith. We need to, at one level, feed this new thing that has been resurrected. Our faith must be fed so it might grow. But I think there's also something else. There's a lesson that maybe Jesus is trying to tell us. But we know certainly in Revelation 3, verse 20, where we started with this verse, here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. Of course, he's going to have a meal. That's what he came for. He came into the house to have a meal. Jairus thought he came into the house to raise his daughter. No, he came in the house to do more than that. He came in the house to stay in the house, to have fellowship with us in the house. Meals are the most beautiful time where we get together, where we talk, where we laugh, where we bond. Jesus didn't come in the house to do something and leave. He came in the house to live in the house, to share our lives in the house. Jesus wants to eat with us. He wants to live in us. He wants to be real for us. And I think in a way, when we consider what's happening at the moment in our lives, we look at how we all disconnected here. We're all over the world, yet somehow we're also together. I can't see you, but I feel you. And exactly the same lesson applies to Jesus. He's never been more real than he is now. And he wants to enter a house and have a meal. And I want to finish with what I consider quite an interesting little gem or coincidence or beautiful thing, because there is something going on here. And there, I think, is another link to go and give her something to eat. We're being asked to think about a food occasion, about a miracle to do with food. And so I want to ask you a question here. How many people were part of this miracle here? So we've just had this experience. How many people were in that room when the miracle took place of raising Jairus' daughter? Let's see if you can get it right. How many people? Now, if you concentrated, you might have been able to remember who was there, because the crowd wasn't there. They were sent out. Who was actually there? I don't need all the names. I just want to know how many. How many people were in that room when this miracle took place? Was it one? Was it maybe two? Oh no, it's got to be at least two, because Jesus was there with the girl, but there were definitely a few others. So how many were in that room when that miracle took place? Right, we've got a whole lot of guesses coming in. 27. Let's see how many we are suggesting. We've got someone saying about 100 million. Yeah, maybe with the angels. Quite a few going for 7 written as 7, 1,000, 8, 12. Okay, so we're getting the full range of numbers, but I'm pleased to see that the biggest number, both written and as a numeral, is the number 7. If you chose 7, you're quite correct. This is what I call the 5 to 12 miracle. The 5 to 12, and yeah, I know that has a double meaning, because it's a miracle that happens right at the end. 5 to 12, maybe the time we're living in right now, the 5 to 12 miracle. But it's a 5 to 12 miracle for this reason. When Jesus arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him, Jesus, except Peter, James, and John. That's the 3 of them, plus Jesus, that's 4, and the child's father and the child's mother, and the child herself is in there. So there are 7 people involved. There are the 5 spectators, and there are the 2 people that are going to be involved in the miracle. Jesus, the healer, the girl who will be raised. And so there are these 7 people, 5 plus 2. Does that ring a bell anywhere? Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will that go among so many? I was wondering whether Jesus was asking us to think about this when he said feed her. Here we see the 5 and the 2. 5 loaves and 2 fish. The 5 people that witnessed it and the 2 that would be involved in the miracle. How far will that go amongst so many? And I think that might be the question we're needing to answer. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. And so after this incredible miracle of feeding all of these thousands of people, there are leftovers. And how many leftovers? There are 12 baskets. And so the 5 and the 2 result in 12 baskets of leftovers. The great miracle of the 7 is actually the 12. You see, while it was amazing that Jesus could take those 7 items, those 5 pieces of bread and the 2 fish, and he could feed all those people, the great miracle was the leftovers, because the miracle was there is so much more. There is an abundance that will feed and is still feeding us today. The miracle took place thousands of years ago, and we are still enjoying it. And it's feeding us today. It's the abundance that feeds more and more. And so we read immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. And she was 12 years old. And they were completely astonished. Coincidence? Maybe not. Strange that we have to know her age, that she's 12. There were 5 and 2 and 12. Because to me, the message that Jesus is telling us, that this miracle isn't finished. This miracle is a miracle that, like the miracle of the loaves, will go bigger and bigger and bigger and spill out of Jairus and his wife's life into the lives around us. And it's doing it right now. And the same thing Jesus is saying to us. If we let him in, the 5, 2, 12 miracle will happen for us, because the impact of him resurrecting our faith and resurrecting our hope and resurrecting our love, and for him living in us and sitting and having a meal is the 5, the 2, but ultimately it's the 12. It's the abundance that flows from us that we might be able to touch the lives of others. And so we're sitting in a storm. We're locked in our houses, and around us it's just ravaging, and it's just crazy, and all the curves are climbing, and it's getting worse. And we are in a time of uncertainty like has never, ever existed on this planet, well, in each of our living memories. And we're inside the house. But maybe more importantly is the storm in our own lives. Because outside us, things are swirling and may swirl worse and worse. And we have to decide what we're going to do, because there are crowds outside and crowds inside. And we need to call on Jesus and ask him to come in and bring life into our home. And the result of that will be fear that is turned to faith. It'll be a noise that is turned to peace. It'll be death that becomes life. It'll be loss that turns into incredible abundance. And Jesus says, here I am. I stand at the door and knock. At this, they were completely astonished. And may we take the opportunity to open the door, because there is something completely astonishing that Jesus wants to do in our lives. In the midst of this very storm, something so astonishing that will not only impact us, but can impact the lives of those around us if we'll just let him. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. May we open the door to Jesus into our lives and experiencing something completely astonishing. Amen. Right, Baz, I'm going to hand back to you at this point.
Unfortunately, my